This is Nick. I'm going to show you how to make a fire piston. Okay, these are the materials you will need to make a fire piston. You need a file, a hacksaw, and I just have the blade here, sandpaper. I have 220 grit and 100 grit and 80 grit or 60 grit. You need O-rings, a permanent marker. You need to go to Home Depot and find these aluminum rods and cylinders, and you need a hand drill. Okay, the first thing you want to do is take your cylinder and your rod and mark them out however long you want your fire piston to be. I marked these at 3.5 inches, and I'll cut them out and then show you the next step. See, I cut out my rod and my cylinder 3.5 inches. You can find these rods and cylinders at Home Depot. They're aluminum and they run about $10 each, but you can make like 5 or 6 fire pistons out of them. You want to find a rod and tube that are similar in diameter. The inside diameter of the tube being similar to the outside diameter of the rod, and what you can see here is they don't quite fit. So what I'm going to have to do is sand down the surface of this rod until it will slide, just barely be able to slide into the cylinder here, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, how I sand the surface of my rod down is I take it and I put it in my drill, just like a drill bit. Then I get a really rough sandpaper. This is 60 grit, and I just sand down the surface. Okay, what you want to do is turn on your drill and just hold your sandpaper and sand down the surface of the rod here like this. I'm gonna finish this outside so I don't mess up my carpet too bad, but every so often you just want to check and see if your cylinder will slide on. Once it gets to where it's able to slide in a little bit, just sand it a little bit farther, and then start using this really fine grit sandpaper. This is 220 grit, to smooth out your surface really smooth before you start sliding it in here, because you don't want to scratch up the inside of this cylinder. Okay, you can see now I've sanded down the surface of my rod and it fits the cylinder. You can see the part where the rod was in the drill didn't get sanded down at all, and that part won't fit. So I'm gonna have to flip this around, do the same process on the other side, and check it to see if it fits. Okay, you can see here I've sanded down the rod so that it will slide in and out of the cylinder pretty easily. The next step you want to do is cut off another portion of this rod that is still not big enough to slide in here, and you want it to be probably about that big. You're going to use it to plug up the end of this to make this cylinder closed at one end. Okay, you can see what I did is I cut out this little plug here, which I'm going to use to plug up the end of this cylinder for my fire piston. What you want to do is sand down this end slightly, and this end don't sand it down at all. You just want this to barely be able to fit into here, and then what you're going to do is you're going to put it in like this, and it doesn't want to go in. But what you're going to do is get a hammer and hammer that down in until it's flush with this surface here, and that's going to create a plug on one end of your piston. Okay, you can see what I'm doing here. I don't have a hammer, but I'm going to use my file here, and I've just been taking it and I've been tapping this plug in a little bit deeper, just tapping it in until it's going to be flush with this edge here. Okay, you can see I've plugged up my one end of my cylinder here, And I've also taken some sandpaper and cleaned up the surface of this, got rid of the little price tag that was on here. And you can see my rod here. I went ahead and used a really fine grit sandpaper and polished up the surface of that. And you can see they do fit together now. The next step I want to do is mark and cut a groove right around here where I'm gonna put the O-ring, so that when I insert it in here, it's an airtight seal and the air can compress down to the bottom here. So I will show you how I cut the groove for the O-ring. Okay, I've marked with a Sharpie a little line here where I'm gonna use my hacksaw blade to cut a groove in my rod here where I'm gonna put the O-ring. What I do here is I mark that with a Sharpie, and then I just start spinning the drill, and I hold my hacksaw blade right on that line where I want the groove to be. You have to do it carefully and slow at first, but then once you get it going you can press a lot harder, and this doesn't take too long. Okay, you can see after just a few seconds of drilling and holding my hacksaw blade up to this rod here, I have started a pretty good groove. I can already tell that's not deep enough for my O-ring, so I'm going to keep doing that, but you want to check this periodically to make sure that you don't go down too far, because if you do that you have to start all over. Okay, I've got my box of O-rings here, and I've cut a groove into my rod here. I'm going to test it out to see if the fit is good yet. I think I've probably got a little ways longer to go, but I'm going to test it out just to be sure. So what you want to do is you grab one of your O-rings out and you fit it over the top of your rod here. Once you've got it in the rod, I kind of take my fingers and press it in to make sure it gets seated down in that groove. And by the looks of it, it looks like it's too big. It's not deep. It's not down deep enough. Yeah, it won't fit into my cylinder. So I'm gonna take off the O-ring, cut the groove a little deeper, and then try again. Okay, taking the O-ring off at this point is really hard because it's already seated pretty deep in that groove. So I'm gonna show you what I do. I take some type of a pin or needle, and without damaging the O-ring, I slide it. Okay, so what I do is I slide a pin or a needle underneath the O-ring, and then that way you can use that to maneuver your O-ring. It's kind of tricky, but get your O-ring off there and then keep cutting down the groove where you want the O-ring to fit. Well, I messed up. I cut the groove too deep. The cylinder fits over the piston, but I'm getting no compression. So I'm going to show you, I've done this before, I'm going to show you what I do to fix this. If you cut your groove for your O-ring too deep, like I've done here, what you can do to fix that without having to start all over is take some plumber's thread tape, wrap it around the groove a few times so that it will make it slightly bigger, and then your O-ring will fit on, and hopefully you'll get better compression that way. Okay, you can see I've wrapped it in plumber's tape, and I've also put my O-ring back on there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a pocket knife and spin the drill while I do this and hold it on either side of the O-ring and just cut off all that excess plumber's tape. Okay, so you can see I put that plumber's tape on there and I cut the excess off, and now I've got it fits into my cylinder and it has pretty good compression. So the next step you want to do is take a drill bit and in the very center of the top of this bore a little hole. That's where your tinder is going to sit and be ignited when you're using your fire piston. If you can see, I've taken a nail and I've pre-marked the center hole where I want to drill just about 1/8 of an inch deep And that's where the tinder is going to be seated in my fire piston. Okay, I've drilled the hole where I'm going to put my tinder in the top of my rod here. Okay, just to talk a little bit about this fire piston here. It's pretty much complete as it is. If you want, you can take like a cabinet handle and attach it to the end here so you can have, you know, a handle to push on when you're using your fire piston. But I kind of like to have it just as is because this way you can store it like that and it fits real nice. When you're using it, you'll just put it down like this end on a piece of wood or, you know, on the ground on a hard surface. Then you take your cylinder and you'll take it and you'll just push down as hard as you can, and then your tinder should be on here ignited, and I'll show you how to use this. Okay, I'm going to show you how to use my compact fire piston here. You need to have some char cloth for tinder, and there are other videos on how to make that. What you want to do is take a piece and just tear it with your hands. You want to get a little square about that size, and then roll it up, ball it up in your fingers, and put it in the top of your fire piston. Get it nice and snug so that it doesn't come out when you're going to use it here. Then what you want to do is stick your rod onto a hard surface, take your cylinder, put it over top there. Okay, we've got ignition there. That is how to make a compact fire piston.